What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Wackaroni's Dragon Ball Collection. Today I've decided to do something slightly different and show you some of the things I sort of regret buying, or some grievances I have with certain things that I've purchased. And I got a few things. I'll try to get through it, as quickly as possible. Let's start with the least egregious thing, and then we'll get to the most egregious thing that I have purchased. Now, this Perfect Cell is actually a pretty good figure. My only issue with it, really, is that it cost way too much money for the size of it. This is, I don't know, what is that? I think they said 9 inches or 8 inches or something when I bought it, but it was way too expensive for the size. I'm pretty sure I could have gotten another one that would have been like, twice the size for the same price. It does look really good, but I regret it for the price that I paid. Let's move on to the next one. And this one in particular, I sort of regretted because there are different poses that I liked better. I could have gotten a different pose for the same price. I usually don't care when, I don't care for when they have their hands out in front of them. It sort of like covers up, covers up details, covers up the face a little bit. And I saw one that was similar, but it was in a position that I liked a little better. He had his hand out like he was punching, and it looked a little bit nicer. And these two are already, they're still good figures. I don't hate them. I think I could have found one that was slightly better if I'd looked a little bit longer. And again, this is another one. It looks pretty good. It's a little small for the price. It was a little too expensive. It still looks nice, but I've seen some other poses of this form of Frieza that if I had just looked a little bit longer at what was available, I could have gotten something. The pose and the size, I probably could have gotten something slightly better for the price, but still enjoy the figure. And it came in way too big of a box for the price, and it's just not quite as big as it should be for the price. And again, nothing terribly wrong with the figure itself. It's slightly boring. It's not a very dynamic position that he's in. This is Super Saiyan 2 Goku. And I had never seen one in person at the store. This happened to be the first one I saw in person at the store, physically. And I thought like, well, I don't have that one. But I have seen others online where he's in a much more dynamic position. He looks like he's fighting, and it's a little more fun. This one's just, I don't know, it's a little mediocre, in my opinion. My only big issues with this particular guy is that it's very translucent plastic. It's not like solid colors. So really there's nothing wrong with the figure itself. My personal preference is just not having, it's got, the plastic becomes semi-translucent, like on the edges a little bit and in the hair, and it just happens to not be. It doesn't really like mesh well with the other figures in the collection. It doesn't really match with them. It doesn't look like it belongs next to them because it's just different. Nothing really wrong with it. If there was a bunch like this, then it would be fine, but it just doesn't really fit with the rest of my characters because it's semi-translucent. I'm not even going to bother trying to set this up perfectly where it's going to stand, because standing is part of one of my big problems. It just doesn't stand. He leans over too far, and the little stand pieces that he came with don't even keep him up really, so I'm not even going to bother doing that. But like, he doesn't ever have his tongue out like that. Like, he's not Venom, and him having his tail open like he's about to absorb something, like this was a creative concept for like a Monsters series of characters that they were doing. It just doesn't quite work for me, and it doesn't stand. It doesn't stand, and the tail falls off very easily. Like, I don't maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. But yeah, the tail is very loose, and the little bits that are supposed to help him stand up don't really work. His eyes are the wrong color. They're blue for some reason. He's got his tongue hanging out, and that's just not really a thing. I get what they were going for with a like monstrous, type. I'm more of a purist with these characters, and sometimes the artistic, creative liberties they take don't quite work for me, especially when they, you could barely have him on a shelf. He's got to be looking down at people. And if you barely touch it, it knocks over, you know? So anyway, that's my issue with that one. Strangely enough, this is the same character, supposed to be the same character as the last one, the imperfect Cell, the mid version of Cell. And my issue with this one is that it was also from Wish.com, and it is definitely some sort of like bootleg knockoff version, and I know that because of what I'll show you in a second. Alright, I'm having to be kind of careful here because that arm that's in front, it falls off really easily, and the tail also falls off really easily. But if you see right here in the front, that bit right there is not supposed to be, there's not supposed to be a gap between the thing on his head. So like you're seeing the yellow from underneath, and I realized this was some sort of knockoff because the coloring is also supposed to be slightly different. The green is supposed to be slightly more yellowish on you know, certain parts of his appendages. There's supposed to be some black in the face next to the side there. And again, this is one where you kind of have to have it like up high because it's so like down to the ground, like you can barely see it. And it's got a lot of problems, and my biggest problem is that big gap right there in the middle of his head. That's not supposed to be there. And before I talk about this one, I just want to be clear. Buying these specific figures is not necessarily bad. The fact is I bought them from non-reputable sources, and I got, you know, a couple bad versions. But finally we have this first form Frieza here. And my issue is when we look a little bit closer, and I'll show you in a second, but the coloring is not quite right on most of it. The sculpture is mostly okay, but I'll get closer and I'll show you what my big deal is with this one. See, the coloration is a little bit of an issue, but it's not nearly as big of an issue as the painting problem is. If you look at his face and his lips and his mouth and his eyes, everything is just off. The paint job was just off. It doesn't look right. The scouter thing is supposed to be semi-translucent, I believe, and it wasn't painted very well. It doesn't look right. Everything's just slightly off because this is some sort of weird bootleg knockoff version, unfortunately. I mean, this should have been a cool figure, and I'll show you some images of what it should look like. But this is one that I regret getting. I was like, oh, it's super cheap. Maybe it'll be good. But no, buying super cheap is not always good. And normally it wouldn't bother me. The horn is a little crooked, a little bent, but really the paint job, and I don't know, it became a little too obvious that this was a bad choice. So anyway, these are the ones that I regret for one reason or another. I hope you didn't mind me just sort of doing a video explaining why, you know, these weren't the best choices of mine. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to leave a comment if you'd like. I enjoy hearing what you guys have to say. And I'll catch you on the next one. I do have one new figure, but I'm planning on buying at least one or two others before I make a brand new figure video. So anyway, this is the one for now. The ones that aren't so great in my opinion for whatever reason. Later guys, peace out.